isolated though, because we're focused on application?
Yeah, so I think, I don't think there's a major OWASP wireless project. Yeah, I think we got some guys that have played with it a little bit in the past. So if you want a project to really drive, I think there's an empty slot there, and I think it's one of those projects that it kind of haven't got a lot of traction. So basically we're waiting for a project leader, right, or a team to really come and drive it.
Jump in there and do it.
Yeah, so it's actually a global projects committee. So if the next step will be I want to do it, what will happen is you ping me or ping Paolo or pick one of the OWASP guys. We would actually we'll do a little bit of research on what projects already are and try to put you in touch with the people that have done maybe something that in the past, and maybe see that either you start a new project or maybe take over an existing one that doesn't have energy or leaders are gone or is not really, or maybe adapt the existing one to add that layer.
Well, let me understand. The OWASP, the whole thing is based on web application secure program.
Mm-hmm.
So are your projects pretty much within those bounds of web application security programming, or are you kind of starting to expand out into maybe network engineering, security, or whatever? Not at all.
Well, I think that we have no. So I think that what happens is, I think historically we do have a big bias and a big focus on applications on web, right? I think the reality is that basically you have, web touches everything, right? So you can't talk about wireless security without talking about web, right? Yes, there might be specific things that, maybe infrastructure-wise that are not that, specific, very, very specific to that particular medium. But we have an infrastructure project. We have, the way I look at it is like, it kind of touches everything. So I don't think that we will have a huge part of OWASP that is focusing on wireless. But I do think that we should have a wireless ecosystem. I do think that it should be possible for me to go to OWASP and gain a really good picture of the web and the wireless implications from a security point of view. And if there are people in OWASP that are interested in that, they should be able to drive it. But yeah, I would say our core focus is the kind of the web, kind of layer part of it. But we do touch other bits.
But what about application software security? Maybe it's not the web.
Well, see, the joke we were having the other day is that we should be called OWASP, right? We should be called OWASP, right? Because it's actually such a bad name that it's kind of won't fly. But because you're right, where do you draw the line, right? If you want an application that doesn't touch the web, probably it isn't going to have a lot of security implications, right? But if you have an application that touches the web, then where do you draw the line in terms of security vulnerabilities, right? Because you can go all the way. So I actually think that it's almost like it should be our community that pushes how far we want to go. Like I said, we had guys who did infrastructure issues, right? We have guys who did all that kind of analysis, and I think that's something that we should be open to it. But I don't think we be focusing exclusively on some of the other things. Does that answer your question? Cool. Any more questions on the OWASP side? Okay, so what I want to jump now is into the O2 world, and because I actually don't have a lot of time, I'm actually going to show you a bunch of videos that actually show the whole thing in action, and I'll basically show you how it basically can work. So this is my story very, very quickly. Why is my videos? Okay, so my frustration as a security consultant in my background is that I couldn't communicate, I couldn't scale, I couldn't transfer the knowledge that I had about security vulnerabilities to the developers, to the client, etc. So the best knowledge I can give you is I was basically giving a PDF to my clients. I was giving them a piece of paper that they're going to have to try to figure out how to do it. They will give that to the developers, they're going to try to figure out how to do that, right? It was a very inefficient way of basically communicating. And also, I basically sometimes would do a black box, I didn't have the source code, sometimes I would do code, I didn't have the analysis. And when I really felt that we really need to find a way to scale our knowledge. We need to find a way to codify what actually we mean when we find a security vulnerability, and to codify what we mean when we have a bit of security guidance. So what's interesting about O2 is that 6 months ago, I'll be talking with this on theory with you guys. Today, I actually have built all the proof of concepts that actually make what the keynote woman was saying. Okay, sorry, I can't remember her name. What she was saying. I'm doing most of that already in the real world. In fact, what I'm actually doing now is going to the tool vendors and saying, hey, I want you guys to show me a way that I can write this script. I can give you this script that automates this particular issue. I want to give it to you. So, and then I want to go to the source code analysis guys and say, hey, I want you to be able to create traces like this, because this particular trace is actually the real world. This is actually how things are working. And then I want to be able to say, hey guys, you need to integrate both together, because what really matters is a particular result that starts on a web layer and ends up actually on the particular source code analysis. So I'm actually at the point where I can look at you guys and says, if you can find an exploit or a vulnerability on the web, or if you can define a pattern, I can codify it. If you can define a pattern on the source code, I can codify it, because I have basically O2, a big, very high productive development environment. So what O2 has basically has a black box part, has a source code analysis part, and has this massive data integration and basically API development. So I actually now develop O2 in O2. So in fact, I built literally a proof of concept static analysis engine the moment that I started to use O2 to develop O2, because it made me that productive. So let me first to show you, right, what I really mean by the stuff that O2 can do, right? So instead of, what's it called? Exploit execution, there you go, Hammy Bank. Okay, so, and yeah, so the other thing that O2 also has a video kind of creation tool, because that's what we need to do. All right, so can you guys see that? Just about, isn't it? Okay, so let me explain what just happened there, right? What happened there was I had a script. Can you guys, okay. So, okay. All right, okay, let's just, damn. Where's my video player? Come on. All right, is that better there? Like that? Okay, here we go. Is that kind of better? All right, I think. Okay, here we go. All right, so, all right. So what just happened there, right, is I had a script, which is a unit test. So if you guys want to take one thing from my presentation today, is that we need to stop giving PDFs away, and we have to give unit tests. Because unit test is the only thing that developers understand. If we actually want those things to get fixed, we need to give developers unit tests. We need to give them the ability to replicate our security knowledge. We need to give them the ability to retest once they start fixing the stuff. And in fact, we need the ability for us to give them 100 unit tests for one issue. So we make sure that they don't just cover one variation of it, they cover all sorts of variations for a particular problem. And that's, how many, if you guys are doing security engagements, how many of you guys been on a case where, you give them the report, the vulnerability, they fix it, by the time you look at it, they realize that all they did was stop your exploit from working, right? Which basically means that they didn't really understand the problem. So the unit test in my world is a story. I can write a unit test that goes from the black box to the browser, continues the analysis on the source code, make sure that things are in place, and then make sure that things are happening in the right order. Because I have access as objects to the browser, have access as objects to the source code, have access to the responses, so I can codify all that in something that has a bunch of sequence. So this is what I do, right? So what I do is I create these unit tests that now has a bunch of tests that I'm going to give the developer. So what I give the developer now is little scripts. And I'm going to show how big or how small the scripts are, who basically are performing the exploit execution, in this case the vulnerabilities. So instead of giving them something that says, oh, by the way, go here, single tick there, there's something, I actually give them something that actually replicates the world. So this is kind of what some of the scanners are doing with browser automation. And this, if you guys heard about Selenium, this is kind of that on steroids. So what this is a way to actually do Selenium or equivalent unit test documentation, but very, very interactive. So you can just see that I just shown an SQL injection. Now I have a vulnerability where I log in, I have to go to the account page, and there's another vulnerability. My next one is where I'm actually going to basically bypass the login page. Again, it's SQL injection, but for a client, this is really bad because I actually bypassed authentication. The next one is where I can actually go into it, the bank, go to my account, and then go and see somebody else's accounts. apps, that's a particular example. I can now also go into the, the admin section, and this is where it gets interesting. So if you actually look at this particular example, right? So this is one of the examples that I actually don't think that there's any, or most tools, okay, and I still want to figure out who can do it. This exact sequence of events. Because what happened here was, I had to log in to the admin, as a user first, right? Then I had to go to the admin sections. And then at the admin section, I actually had to look at the view state of this page in .NET. But the view state is actually, although it's not encrypted, there's a special way to do it. So you actually can just decode it normally. You actually have to use a couple of APIs to decode the view state. And then what you actually need to do is you need to go into the 12th value of the view state that happens to have the password for this particular thing. Because there's a vulnerability in .NET where, or maybe a bad practice where if you mark a server-side control as not visible, that data still ends up on the view state, which is very common. So in this particular case, you actually have a case where the password is there, and then I have to log in. So now basically you can see that what this script is doing, so basically what this script is doing, running from the video, is basically I replayed automatically this big sequence of actions. So I basically logged in, went in here, grabbed the view state, grabbed the 12th value, got into the admin section. And now is where the really interesting part happens. So if you look at it from my testing point of view, I've now, okay, let me just log in. So what I've now done was I've now found out, so if you look at this, right, to that particular page there, come back. So if you actually look at this particular example, what you actually have is, and if you look at this, right, you can see here that I actually now have the admin pages. So I actually now found out the admin page of the website. So what do I want to do? What I want to do is actually log in as admin. I want to grab these pages. I want to log out, and I want to log back in and test each one of these pages. And that's my workflow. So what my next script does is basically the ability to do exactly that. So what my next script does is you can see that I'm going to log in as that user, I'm going to go to the admin section, I'm going to grab this, I'm going to log out, I'm going to log back in, and each one of these pages is a vulnerability. Because each one of these pages are admin controls that are now accessible as a normal user. And what I'm able to do is I'm able to codify that. And in some ways, the reason this is powerful, for example, if you're doing a security analysis, is because my current workflow, and the workflow you guys should be pursuing, is that you are automating yourself at every stage. So when I'm looking at the authorization problem for the admin page, I don't have to worry about how to get there. I already have a script, or in some ways an exploit, that gets me to the admin page. So I can continue, in some ways, my development or my exploitation from there. So I actually got to the point where it's faster for me to build an API for the app that I'm testing to actually do it by hand. Because the more the API gets, the more understanding and the more basically speed I have, because I now have almost an object model that represents the application. So if very, very quickly to actually see what that script looks like, is basically that script literally looks like this. So if I go to one of the O2 development environments, and I basically go for, find that little script, which is here on HatMe Bank. So you can see that I have an API for HatMe Bank. And basically what I also have, if you guys can see that, is the script that does this. All right. So what this is, right, is this is basically, remember those little things on the left? Each one of these functions is basically one of those scripts. So you can see that the code to do that is actually pretty simple. It's literally just browser, field, text username, value, bank. So if you want to see the Viewstate Exploit, the Viewstate Exploit is basically this one here. This is, can you see that? That particular one is the Viewstate one, and this is the line of code that gives you the view state. Now, what I want to do with this is I want to give this to the tool vendors. I want to give this to the client. Because now I have a way to, basically, I stored my application security knowledge in that little bit of script. And that's basically the analysis that I've done. And what allows me to do is now allows me to have a much more productive and good conversation with the client, because I can now automate any type of basically browser or even source code analysis kind of driven point of view. So basically, and you can see when I go to the vulnerability for authorization, what I'm actually doing now is just basically grabbing my previous method and invoking it. Now, again, my objective here is not to do something that out of the box works. My objective here is to do something that I can actually model the real world and to build an application around it. So I have, Dot2 already has a full-blown static analysis for .NET, which I'm not going to have the time